The Kthar emerged from the darkness of space like nightmares given form. Their bodies, covered in naturally shifting camouflage patterns that could adapt to any environment, moved with predatory grace that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary perfection. Sharp appendages that could slice through metal as easily as flesh glinted in the pale light of the binary star system they called home. But perhaps most terrifying was their ability to emit disorienting sonic pulses, a hunting adaptation that could stun prey long enough for the killing blow. Commander Forlag stood on the command platform of his warship, surveying the tactical display with yellow, slitted eyes. 6 specialized digits manipulated the holographic controls as he zoomed in on the small human outpost nestled near the edge of the nebula. They call themselves scientists, he hissed to his second-in-command, Trazak, studying the nebula's radiation patterns. The derision in his voice was unmistakable. Trazak's camouflage shifted slightly, a sign of amusement among the Kthar. They certainly don't look like warriors. The feed showed small, soft-looking bipeds moving about their facility. No obvious weapons, no armor. Their bodies were embarrassingly exposed, lacking any natural defenses. They communicated constantly through their primitive audio devices, seemingly incapable of the telepathic resonance that the Kthar elite used in battle. The Council of Claws was correct to finally expand into this sector, Forlag said, closing the feed with a dismissive gesture. If these are the beings we must contend with, our conquest will be swift. The Kthar had only recently ventured into this part of the galaxy, having spent millennia perfecting their society in isolation. Their culture revolved entirely around strength, the ability to hunt, to dominate, to conquer. Those who could not fight were relegated to servitude. Those who would not fight were eliminated. It was natural law, as immutable as the void of space itself. And Forlag was the embodiment of Kthar ideals. Rising through the ranks through cunning and brutality, he had defeated 3 rival commanders in ritual combat, earning him the right to lead this expansion fleet. His exoskeleton bore the ritual scars of 100 victories and the neural implants at the base of his skull, marking him as one of the telepathically gifted, pulsed with a faint blue light. They've been sending out probe drones, Trazak reported, pulling up new data, collecting samples from the nebula gases. Harmless scavengers, Forlag replied, though I find their presence irritating. The Kthar had been observing the human outpost for nearly a full solar cycle. The bipeds had arrived with little fanfare, constructing their modest facility at the nebula's edge and beginning their research. They had made no aggressive moves, had claimed no territory beyond their small station. They had even attempted to establish communication with the Kthar upon first noticing their vessels, sending simple mathematical sequences as a universal greeting. Forlag had ignored them. What was there to discuss with prey? Commander, one of the sensor operators called out, their voice carrying the distinctive clicking undertone of the lower warrior caste. One of the human probes has entered our sovereign space. Forlag's camouflage darkened, a sign of displeasure. Show me. The display shifted to reveal a small, unmanned drone drifting into an area the Kthar had claimed as their territorial boundary. Its movements were erratic, likely affected by the nebula's magnetic disturbances. It appears to be malfunctioning, Trazak observed. Irrelevant, Forlag snapped. Its presence insults us. Destroy it immediately. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from one of the Kthar patrol vessels, vaporizing the drone in an instant. Within moments, a transmission came from the human outpost. A soft-faced biped appeared on screen, its features arranged in what the Kthar's xenobiologist believed was an expression of concern. Kthar vessel, this is Scientific Outpost Nebuline. We apologize for our drone's intrusion into your claimed space. The nebula's radiation caused a navigation failure. We meant no offense and request a channel for diplomatic discussion to prevent future misunderstandings. Forlag's upper limbs twitched in what his crew recognized as suppressed rage. They apologize as if we are equals who might be offended, rather than superiors who have been trespassed against. He activated the transmission system. Human outpost, he growled. not bothering to use their designated name. Your intrusion has been dealt with. There is nothing to discuss. Keep your primitive devices away from Cathar territory, or we will consider it an act of aggression. The human's expression shifted subtly. We understand the importance of territorial boundaries and will ensure our equipment stays within our designated research area. However, establishing communication protocols would benefit. Pour la courte transmission. Predictable. They fear us, as they should, yet still believe they can negotiate as equals. Should we increase patrols near their outpost? Trazak asked. No, Forlag said after a moment's consideration. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. I believe it's time we learned exactly what these humans are studying. Prepare a raiding party. I will lead it myself. Trazak's camouflage pulsed with surprise. Is that necessary, Commander? They pose no threat. Precisely why it will be so easy, Forlag responded. Besides, their technology, primitive though it may be, might have some value, and it will establish our dominance clearly. As the Cathar warriors prepared for the raid, none questioned their commander's decision. None considered the possibility that the seemingly defenseless humans might be more than they appeared. After all, throughout their long history of conquest, the Cathar had never encountered a species that could stand against them. Why would these soft, weaponless creatures be any different? The Cathar attack force descended on a human research outpost with overwhelming force. 6 assault craft, each carrying 10 elite warriors, surrounded the modest facility in a standard domination pattern. The outpost's automated defense systems, little more than basic shields and warning sensors, were neutralized within seconds. Forlag, leading from the front as befitted a Cathar commander, burst through the primary airlock with 4 of his best warriors. Their natural camouflage shifted to match the sterile white and gray of the human facility, though they hardly needed the advantage of surprise against such feeble opponents. Spread out, he ordered through the telepathic link all Cathar warriors shared. Secure the humans and any valuable technology. Kill only if necessary. I want prisoners for interrogation. The researchers, caught completely off guard, reacted with predictable panic. Some froze in terror at the sight of the Cathar warriors, while others attempted to flee deeper into the facility. A few managed to trigger alarm systems before being subdued. Dr. Eleanor Wright, lead xenobiologist, was cornered in her laboratory. Unlike some of her colleagues, she didn't scream or plead. Instead, she quickly activated a small device on her wrist console before raising her hands in surrender. We are non-combatants conducting scientific research, she said firmly as 2 Cathar warriors seized her. This is a violation of Galactic Compact protocols. Forlag strode into the laboratory, his imposing frame dwarfing the human scientist. The Cathar recognize no such protocols, he said, examining the laboratory equipment with casual interest. Your presence near our territory is provocation enough. We've made no aggressive actions, Dr. Wright replied, maintaining remarkable composure. Our research is purely scientific, studying the unique radiation signatures of the nebula. Your research is now Cathar property, Forlag said dismissively, as are you and your fellow humans. Within 20 minutes, the entire outpost was under Cathar control. 17 human scientists were gathered in the main conference room, guarded by armed warriors, while others systematically downloaded data from the outpost computers and collected samples of their technology. Forlag observed the captives with predatory interest. They were even more physically unimpressive up close, soft skin, no natural weapons, limited sensory capabilities. Yet there was something in their eyes that puzzled him. Not just fear, which he expected, but something else. A calm calculation that seemed out of place in prey species. You are now subjects of the Cathar Dominion, he announced to the gathered humans. Cooperate, and you may prove useful enough to live. Resist, and you will be eliminated. Dr. Wright, still showing remarkable poise, stepped forward despite the warning growl from her guard. Commander, this action will not go unanswered. Earth Central will respond when we fail to report in. Forlag's camouflage rippled with amusement. And what will they send? More scientists? Your species has no concept of true warfare. You're making assumptions based on incomplete information, Dr. Wright said evenly. I strongly advise you to release us and withdraw from this outpost immediately. Something in her tone, not fear, but absolute certainty, caused Forelag a moment's hesitation. But he quickly dismissed it. Prey often made threats when cornered. Your confidence is misplaced, he said, turning away. Secure them in their quarters. Postguards. I want their research data fully analyzed within 6 hours. As Forelag left the conference room, he failed to notice the small emergency beacon that Dr. Wright had activated. A beacon transmitting on a frequency the Cthar scanners couldn't detect. The diplomatic channel opened 3 hours after the Cthar seizure of the research outpost. The High Council of the Cthar Dominion, initially irritated by the interruption, grew intrigued when informed that a human diplomatic vessel was requesting immediate communication regarding the regrettable incident at the nebula. Supreme Hierarch Kvex, the most powerful of the Cthar leaders, personally accepted the transmission. The being that appeared on the communication screen was another soft-skinned human, this one adorned in formal attire rather than the utilitarian clothing of the scientists. I am Ambassador Jonathan Hayes of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, the human said with formal precision. I am contacting you regarding the illegal seizure of our research outpost and the taking of our citizens as prisoners. Kvex's neural implants pulsed as he communicated telepathically with his advisors before responding. The actions taken were justified. Your outpost encroached on territory claimed by the Cthar Dominion. The outpost is located in neutral space as defined by the Galactic Cartography Commission. Ambassador Hayes replied without a trace of intimidation. A commission your representatives chose not to participate in, despite invitation. The Cthar defined their own boundaries, Kvex responded. We're not bound by the decisions of lesser species. Ambassador Hayes' expression remained impassive. I am authorized to negotiate the peaceful resolution of this situation. We request the immediate release of our citizens and withdrawal of your forces from our facility. Behind Kvex, the council members communicated silently through their neural network. Some expressed concern about the humans' confidence, suggesting caution until more was known about their capabilities. Others, including those who had supported Forelag's rise to command, advocated for a display of dominance. Kvex, who had ruled the council through centuries of conquest, sided with the hardliners. Your request is denied. The outpost and its occupants are now Cthar property by right of conquest. For the first time, a hint of emotion crossed the ambassador's face. Not fear, but something closer to resignation. Then you leave us no choice. If diplomatic channels fail, we will be forced to resolve this situation through other means. Threats. Kvex's camouflage darkened dangerously. From a species with no significant military presence in this sector. Not a threat, Ambassador Hayes said calmly. Simply information. We will be deploying Marines to the area. The word meant nothing to Kvex or the Council. Their translators identified it as some type of human military unit, but without context, it carried no weight. Deploy whatever forces you wish, Kvex said dismissively. It will only end in their destruction. Ambassador Hayes nodded solemnly. The outcome is now in your hands. I strongly advise you to reconsider before our Marines arrive. As the transmission ended, most of the council dismissed the exchange as typical prey behavior, making empty threats when cornered. But one of the eldest members, a scarred veteran of countless conflicts, activated a query to their intelligence databases. The results were sparse but troubling. 3 separate predatory species, the reptilian draconians, the hive-minded Varaxians, and the silicon-based lithoids, all had historical records mentioning encounters with human Marines. The specific details were limited, but the consistent element in all records was a warning. Avoid confrontation at all costs. When this information was shared with the council, it was met with derision. Propaganda, one member declared, designed to compensate for their physical weakness. Perhaps, the elder counselor said, but it is unusual for 3 dominant species to share the same caution about a lesser opponent. After brief deliberation, The council decided to forward the intelligence to Commander Forlag as a matter of protocol, but with no change to his orders. The Kthar would not be intimidated by mysterious threats or vague warnings. At the captured outpost, Forlag received the intelligence brief with open skepticism. "Marines?" he asked the assembled human prisoners, the unfamiliar word awkward in his mouth. "Your ambassador threatens us with Marines." The humans exchanged glances but remained silent. "What are these Marines?" Forlag pressed, focusing on Dr. Wright, who had emerged as the informal leader of the captives. "Some form of elite warriors?" Dr. Wright's expression remained neutral. "Marines are our response when diplomacy fails." "That tells me nothing," Forlag growled, his patience thinning. "It tells you everything you need to know," Dr. Wright replied. "They're coming. You should leave while you can." Forlag's camouflage darkened with anger. "You think your kind can threaten the Kthar? Whatever these Marines are, mechanical, biological, or something else, they will fail against the greatest hunters in the galaxy." One of the younger scientists, unable to maintain the stoic facade of his colleagues, blurted out, "You don't understand what you've done." "Enlighten me, then," Forlag said, turning his predatory gaze to the young human. "I can't," the scientist replied, genuine pity in his voice. "Some things can only be understood through experience." Forlag dismissed the cryptic warnings as psychological tactics, the final desperate attempts of prey to dissuade a predator. He ordered increased security around the outpost and prepared his warriors for the arrival of these mysterious Marines, whatever they might be. None of the Kthar noticed the subtle change in the captive human's demeanor after the ambassador's message. The resignation and fear had been replaced with something else, a quiet, patient certainty. 3 days after the seizure of the outpost, Kthar sensors detected a single human vessel approaching the nebula. The ship was unremarkable, a standard military transport according to their databases, with minimal weapon systems and a life sign count of fewer than 30 individuals. Forlag, who had expected a fleet, was almost disappointed. "This is their rescue force? One transport?" "It appears so," Commander Trazak confirmed. "They are maintaining a steady course toward the outpost. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt to conceal their approach." "Scan it thoroughly," Forlag ordered. "Look for hidden weapons, cloaked escort vessels, anything unusual." The scans revealed nothing unexpected. The ship was exactly what it appeared to be, a basic transport carrying approximately 24 human life forms. "They're hailing us," a communications officer reported. "Ignore it," Forlag said. "Let them know we don't consider them worth acknowledging." He turned to his tactical officer. "Deploy our forces. I want 200 warriors ready to repel their landing attempt. Position our patrol vessels to intercept if they deviate from their current trajectory." The Kthar warriors, eager for combat after days of guard duty, prepared for battle with ritualistic precision. They checked their weapons, activated their neural combat networks, and adjusted their camouflage patterns to match the environment around the outpost. Forlag himself donned his ceremonial combat armor, an exoskeleton reinforced with the harvested materials from previous conquests. Its neural interfaces linked with his implants, enhancing his already formidable abilities and feeding tactical data directly to his consciousness. "They will likely attempt to dock at one of the outpost's auxiliary ports," he told his officers. "We will allow them to land, then eliminate them in close quarters where our natural advantages are greatest." The human vessel, still making no attempt to conceal its approach or evade the Kthar patrol ships, established a stable orbit around the nebula, just beyond comfortable weapons range. "They're deploying something," Trazak reported suddenly. "Small objects. Dozens of them." Forlag watched as the tactical display showed multiple tiny signatures detaching from the transport. They were too small to be conventional shuttles, barely large enough to contain a single human. Individual drop pods, he realized with surprise. They're using personnel insertion devices. The drop pods, utilizing the nebula's radiation to mask their heat signatures, were difficult for Kthar sensors to track. They scattered in different directions, their trajectories seemingly random. "They're attempting to confuse our targeting systems," Forlag concluded. A primitive tactic. Target as many as possible. The Cathar patrol vessels opened fire, destroying several of the pods, but most disappeared into the nebula's swirling gases, effectively vanishing from their sensors. Estimate their landing zones, Forlag commanded. Redirect forces to likely insertion points. But even as he gave the order, the first reports of contact came in. Not from the perimeter as expected, but from within the outpost itself. Intruder alert in Section 7 came the first transmission. Single human and armored. The message cut off abruptly. Before Forlag could process this, another alert sounded. Movement in the ventilation system near the prisoner quarters. Then another. Breach at the power regulation center. Forlag's tactical display began showing alarm indicators throughout the facility, seemingly at random. His warriors, deployed to defend against an external assault, were out of position. How do they get inside? He demanded. Unknown, Commander, Trazak replied, his usual composure slipping. Sensors didn't detect any conventional entry. The nebula, one of the sensor operators suggested. Its properties could have masked their approach if they used some form of stealth technology. Forlag's combat training took over. Lock down all sections. Initiate. Warrior pair protocols. No Cathar operates alone. Secure the prisoners first. They're the objective. But when the guards reached the prisoner quarters, they found only empty rooms. The human scientists had vanished. By the time Forlag realized the true extent of the infiltration, it was too late. Reports flooded in from throughout the outpost. Cathar warriors found unconscious or immobilized, systems disabled, weapons caches secured. The invaders, the Marines, moved with impossible speed and coordination. They seemed to know the layout of the outpost perfectly, anticipating the Cathar responses before they happened. More disturbing still, they had clearly studied Cathar biology and tactics. They targeted neural implants with precision electronic countermeasures, disrupting the telepathic command network. They used the Cathar's own camouflage adaptations against them, employing strobing lights that forced their skin to cycle through patterns too quickly, disorienting their neural systems. Forlag, cut off from many of his warriors due to the communications disruption, gathered his elite guard in the command center. How many are there? He demanded. We've confirmed visual contact with 12 different humans, one officer reported. But they're moving so quickly and efficiently that it seems like more. 12 against 200, Forlag hissed. And they're winning? A thunderous explosion rocked the command center as the main door was breached. Forlag and his guards turned toward the entrance, weapons ready. Through the smoke stepped 3 figures in formidable but not bulky armor. Their helmets concealed their features, but their movements were unmistakably human. They carried compact weapons that Forlag didn't recognize. Hold your positions, he ordered his guards telepathically, preparing to emit a stunning sonic pulse. But before he could attack, one of the Marines raised a small device and activated it. A high-frequency signal pierced Forlag's consciousness, scrambling his neural implant. The sonic pulse died in his throat, and he staggered backward. In the momentary confusion, the Marines moved. They didn't fire their weapons as expected. Instead, they closed the distance with shocking speed and engaged the Cathar in hand-to-hand combat. What followed defied Forlag's understanding of warfare. The humans didn't fight like prey, desperately defending themselves. They fought with precision and efficiency that bordered on artistry. They used the Cathar's greater size and strength against them, redirecting momentum and targeting joint structures with devastating effect. When one of the guards managed to land a blow on a Marine, the human's armor absorbed the impact, and the warrior found himself in a joint lock that exploited a natural weakness in Cathar exoskeletal structure, a weakness Forlag hadn't realized was common knowledge. Within minutes, the elite guards were subdued, and Forlag found himself pinned to the ground, a human knee pressing against a nerve cluster at the base of his neck, rendering him immobile. The Marine removed his helmet, revealing an unremarkable human face with a disciplined expression. The rank insignia on his armor identified him as a sergeant. Commander Forlag, the Marine said in perfect Cathar language, your outpost is secured. Your warriors have been neutralized without fatalities. The scientists are safe. Forlag, his pride wounded more deeply than his body, snarled in defiance. Impossible. How could soft creatures like you defeat the greatest warriors in the galaxy? The sergeant's expression didn't change. You mistake physical strength for effectiveness, he said simply. Marines are trained to adapt, to overcome, to use an opponent's assumptions against them. You had information, Forlag accused. Our biological data, our tactical patterns. Of course we did, the sergeant replied. Knowledge is a weapon like any other. We study our potential adversaries long before we ever face them. The outpost personnel, Forlag realized suddenly. They were collecting data on us, not just the nebula. The nebula research is genuine, the sergeant said. But yes, every human outpost in unexplored territory has secondary monitoring protocols for first contact scenarios. Had you responded diplomatically rather than with aggression, this encounter would have gone very differently. Before Forlag could respond, another Marine entered the command center. Sergeant Miller, all objectives secure. Transport is ready for prisoner transfer. The sergeant nodded. Begin evacuation procedures. As Forlag was pulled to his feet, restrained with devices specifically designed for Cathar physiology, he asked one final question. What are you? Not just soldiers. Something else. Sergeant Miller considered the question for a moment. We're Marines, he said, as if that explained everything. We adapt. We overcome. We never underestimate an opponent, regardless of their appearance. He paused. And we never leave our people behind. The efficiency of the Marine operation became even more apparent during the withdrawal. The human scientists were safely evacuated, along with all their critical research data. The Cathar warriors were left restrained but unharmed, with release mechanisms set to activate after the humans had safely departed. Forlag himself, along with his senior officers, was taken as a prisoner, a diplomatic bargaining chip to ensure the Cathar would negotiate rather than retaliate. As the Marines' transport departed the nebula, leaving behind a stunned and humiliated Cathar force, news of the incident spread quickly throughout nearby sectors. The details grew with each retelling. How a handful of human Marines had overcome hundreds of Cathar warriors, how they had moved like ghosts through solid walls, how they had known exactly where to strike to disable rather than kill. By the time Forlag and his officers were returned to Cathar space 3 weeks later, released as a gesture of diplomatic goodwill following tense negotiations, the story had become legend. The Supreme Hierarch Vex, humiliated by the defeat, publicly denounced Forlag as incompetent and stripped him of rank. But privately, the Hierarch and the High Council were shaken. They commissioned an immediate and thorough analysis of the incident, drawing on xenopsychologists, military strategists, and intelligence gatherers from across Cathar space. Their findings were compiled in a classified report that quickly became required reading for all Cathar military commanders. The report, titled Threat Assessment, Human Marines, outlined in clinical detail why these particular humans represented such an effective counter to predatory species. The human Marines, the report concluded, represent an evolutionary anomaly, prey species that have developed predator tactics while retaining prey adaptability. Their effectiveness stems not from superior strength or natural weapons, but from 4 key factors that directly counter predatory psychology. First, they exploit the predator's contempt for perceived weakness. By appearing physically unimposing, they encourage overconfidence and tactical errors. Second, they weaponize intelligence gathering. While predators rely on instinct and proven hunting methods, Marines systematically study their opponents and develop specialized countermeasures. Third, they exhibit unpredictability. Where predator species follow optimal attack patterns honed by evolution, Marines employ constantly evolving strategies that cannot be anticipated through conventional tactical analysis. Fourth, and perhaps most disturbing, they demonstrate psychological resilience beyond normal parameters. The concept of sacrifice and duty appears to override self-preservation instincts, making standard intimidation tactics ineffective. The report's recommendations were unprecedented in Cathar history. Avoid confrontation with human marines whenever possible. If confrontation is unavoidable, never underestimate them based on physical appearance. Consider them apex predators regardless of biological indicators to the contrary. When the report circulated among other spacefaring species, many recognized their own experiences. The Draconians shared accounts of a failed invasion of a human colony world, where a single platoon of Marines had held off an overwhelming force long enough for civilian evacuation. The Varaxians admitted that their brief war with humanity had ended after Marines infiltrated 3 hive centers simultaneously, capturing queens without firing a shot. Even the ancient lithoids, who rarely acknowledged other species as worthy of notice, contributed a terse historical notation. Marines encountered. Engagement terminated. Conflict reassessed as non-viable. The psychological impact of these collected accounts was profound, especially among species that defined themselves by their predatory nature. The word Marines began to carry weight beyond its literal meaning, evolving into a shorthand for unexpectedly dangerous or deceptively lethal. Xenolinguists noted with interest how the term entered the colloquial languages of multiple species. In Draconian, facing the Marines became an idiom for an unavoidable consequence of poor decisions. In the chemical communication of the Varaxians, the pheromone sequence for Marine began to be used as a warning signal. Even in the resonance patterns of lithoid communication, the frequency that translated roughly as Marine gained harmonic overtones indicating caution and reassessment. For the Cathar, the impact was particularly significant because of their cultural emphasis on dominance and natural hierarchy. The concept that a seemingly lesser species could so thoroughly outmaneuver them challenged foundational aspects of their worldview. Decades after the Nebula incident, the ripple effects were still evident throughout Cathar society. Military training was completely overhauled, with new emphasis on intelligence gathering and adaptive tactics rather than raw strength. Diplomatic protocols were established for interactions with humans, with special provisions for situations involving Marines. Young Cathar were taught the story of Forlag as a cautionary tale, a reminder that appearance and capability were not always aligned. The disgraced commander's name became synonymous with fatal arrogance. In trading outposts where Cathar merchants interacted with other species, observers noted a peculiar phenomenon. When humans casually mentioned Marines in conversation, regardless of context, Cathar present would instinctively shift their camouflage to submission patterns and adopt less aggressive postures. The reaction appeared to be almost reflexive, bypassing conscious control. Xenopsychologists classified this as a learned fear response that had been reinforced through cultural transmission. The word itself had become a trigger that activated deeply ingrained caution, similar to how prey species instinctively react to predator scents. Humanity, for their part, understood the weight their Marines carried in interstellar relations. While never explicitly using this reputation as a threat, human diplomats became adept at subtly leveraging it. A gentle mention that Marine advisors have expressed concern could defuse tensions in negotiations with predatory species more effectively than overt displays of force. During one particularly tense territorial dispute with the aggressive Zendiarai horde, a human ambassador reportedly prevented conflict by simply noting that this situation may require Marine consultation if diplomatic solutions couldn't be found. The Zendiarai, who had never directly encountered Marines but had heard the stories from their Cathar allies, immediately adopted a more cooperative stance. As humanity expanded further into the galaxy, establishing more research outposts and colonies, they rarely needed to actually deploy Marines to maintain security. The reputation that preceded them was often protection enough. This phenomenon became the subject of a famous observation by Elder Kvex, who had survived long enough to see his species transition from arrogant conquerors to cautious participants in galactic affairs. The humans have achieved what no species before them managed, the aged hierarch noted in his final address to the council. They have rewritten the laws of power not through conquest, but through the psychological weight of a single word. In our collective consciousness, Marines invokes an instinctive fear response more powerful than any weapon. It reminds us that true danger lies not in fangs or claws, but in the intelligent adaptation to overcome all obstacles, a lesson we learned at great cost to our pride. The human phrase that best captured this unique position in interstellar relations came from a Marine sergeant speaking to new recruits. We don't have to be the strongest species in the galaxy. We just have to be the one that predators think twice about hunting. And throughout the vast expanse of space, predator species continued to think twice, to hesitate, to reconsider, whenever they heard that humans might send in the Marines.